So in the question and answer session yesterday, we weren't really able to pick up many questions. So we will continue with the question and answer session today. And if there are any questions, please feel free to ask them at this point.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's about anger.
Anger.
Yeah. So in psychology, some might say that there is something that is healthy anger. And it's not about dwelling in the anger or rage, but it's a protective mechanism that we know when something is not right for us. So let's say we had actually an example in a different retreat that we talked about, that let's say I'm walking down the street and someone is touching me. So the emotion of anger that is rising in me can help me protect myself, for example, and do whatever I need to do. So like the fight or flight response, for example, which is related to anger. So my question is, what is Geshe-la opinion about it? And in Buddhism in general, is there something that anger, again, not dwelling in it, I understand why that is wrong, but yeah, the relation to anger in general.
Yes. The Tiwadi ni dirtukshima, namazo kondroira, kondro sai kapsusra, ani nganzagi kondro namgyu shukchimbo sana, tani di nganzo namgyu ni nyimi shukchimbo yorila ni shigiras. Di da wele chetuli dusra. Inaya ani nega mambo chila kondro sawa digi susula sungjob chigiras. Kaila na da bena chashana lamba chila totina mechigi ni kurang pimechira. Mechigi demazu ni lamba dindu gyang daga lenasra. Nkapti duza mo kondro saya di rangshiras. Kondro di sane da sora suzuki negabdela ni kare susula sungjob kare chiyagudu di sangma chetogi yoras. Cheza ani kondro kurang da namgyune manzogi nyumo chila shagi yoras. Ine mi mechigi jurim na kondro kapkapla kondro masana yungai mechogi nizidu yoras. Pena shashana susula sungjob chiyagudu. Ini seminar report-ane flight and fight and kijajik shigira. Fight lana zinge, flight lana ani chwe-chwe. Da kapti duza malum kondrogi ini dila shukshin moti gir. Di semje ina mi ina samala di ranshingi lido. Nedang di susola medewa da dendre, susola di nyingaya joshi tuna. Ini dine ba yangna yodab chiye, yangna dila donglan chiye shido zinge yora. Di zo jabla shukshin ro, shukshin shu dingi di susola jula jijogi kondro jura. Otigi ini jigi yores. Ini Geshe machirangi dila ini daze kati yores.
네, 나 신앙이 그다음 저기 공부를 하다가 거기 두야 이거. 나 이제 내가 맞아. 이제 저거에 되고. 네가는 아주 바가에 미 가르치는 제주들은 수저 좀 하고 저기로. 그냥 그만으로 그냥 그러나디 중요도 가봐도 나도 나가 가리 스마트폰 저기 저거 가는 거 봐. 지금 근데 공 맞게 매매 무시고 맞아요. 그렇지. 근데 지시지 이렇게 딱 걸어 거기에 제시는 저도이 있어요. 근데 나도 다들 소지 때문에 빠지기 가래 가봐. 소소로 지금 중국에 나래 이제 잡아서 그 먹죠. 이제 초등학교 생각 봤어야 다. 그래서 봐야도 그 초등 내거래 혼자라야 될 주의라. 지난기 가서 공부를 수술을 숨긴 남바지다 열라. 다다 정말 지금 수술도 누가 가서 저거 보면 되고 말아. 그래도 가시 보관 좀 지혜라 같이 가라다. 가대로 자 두에다 줘야라고 하나로 받아야라고 되게 소가. 가지 저도이. 지난기 가서 공부선이 수술을 순저 집이 지혜 남바지요. 와. 근데 뭐가 찍고 싶잖아. 막 쉬우면 지나서 보다 막하라고 계속 말. 이네 이게 나가 배 무슨 거지 잡송선 수수수에 이거 쓰고 싶한다고 그러. 이 같이 그러면 나라 약도야 나라 수저 쳐야 이게 체인이나 이나래 말아 지금 우리가 지금 딱 가는 게 수술 누가 있으면 수에 있으니까 아주 같이 자고 와. 피자비다 들이 얘기 콜라 같이 자고 그 들에 마스요 와. 아까 지금 말만 컴퓨터가 제 지친지는 치치는 그래서 매도 자자로 차이. 나게 되겠어. 내가 야 배도
this perspective, then if it comes down to that, for a genuine practitioner, then it is said that they have to learn to forsake and let go in those moments any kind of flight or fight response that normally comes to us, and they would actually, a genuine practitioner has actually in those moments let go all sense of your own self-protection in those moments, because they would do anything to not let a moment of anger arise in them or to give in to a moment of anger. But then this is almost impossible for us, impossible for us. So then, when you're talking about that aspect of anger, which triggers a flight or a fight response in situations of danger, then it's not just only it is just not only evident in those situations. When we think carefully, then we always have this notion that anger has an aspect of protection. It's a defense mechanism in a sense. And when you think about it, it's not only in those like dangerous situations. For example, if someone uses harsh words towards you, then anger arises in you. And why do you get angry? Because you want to protect your reputation, because you want to protect your sense of who you are. And then as a response to that, you are saying harsh words back, or you are trying to attack him in a similar manner. So when you think about that, then anger always has that mistaken aspect that we think is protecting ourselves, even in terms of whether it's in a dangerous situation or in terms of using at the smallest example of harsh words. So anger always has that mistaken aspect that we think we are protecting ourselves from danger or protecting our idea of who we are from criticism, harsh words, and so forth. So then, as a genuine practitioner, we need to let go of that sense of fear and sense of protecting protecting our sense of dignity, our sense of who we are. But then this is very hard for us as beginners on the path. So then, in moments of great danger, then it makes sense to kind of not react in anger, but to do what is necessary to save yourself from that danger. Not motivated by a sense of anger or only, but using your wisdom and intelligence in those situations. So then, of course, as you say, in those situations, it makes sense to kind of do something out of a sense of self-defense to protect yourselves. Maybe we can say that is justified in those moments for ourselves as beginners on the path. But then when we think about, as we already explored, how it is very similar in those moments of danger as well as the way we normally react out of anger. And where does this come from? It comes from that same notion that we need to protect ourselves. In terms of great danger, we think that we need to protect our life. And in terms of other moments of anger, then it's generally related to fame, our name, when we are attacked with harsh words, and then when some people actually begin to take away what you have accumulated, then you feel a sense of anger because it affects your status, position, and so forth. So when we look at that relation, it's very similar in the sense. Now you need to kind of weigh the pros and cons in these situations, and then make a decision on the basis of weighing these pros and cons. So it makes sense that in terms of life or death, or in terms of being harassed, then it makes sense to act out of self-defense. And when in terms of other situation, then it's very hard for us, even in those moments, to kind of not react out of anger. So then it's very important that we should not immediately give in to anger in those moments. Even though we do feel angry, it's important to learn to not to give into anger in those moments. Yes.
근데 이게 내가 저지게 수수고야 좀 내가 수술을 하고 하잖아. 근데 내가 사실 근데 내가 저지 통은 아무도 저지 얘기했잖아. 수술을 버티고 나에 사실 내가 저지가 마로 제 저거라 그냥 지금 말하고 진짜 그 수술을 좀 해야 너는 그냥 가서 기도해 봐. 야, 지금 사실 여기서 똑바로 수술 심지어도 아니면 지금 미셔가지고 그만을 잡아도 되는 그래서 무슨 아무도 저를 제가 버티야나 오늘 말아야나 다시 되네. 근데 제가 지금라.
So then, sorry. So then it's important not to put yourself into places of danger, of being harassed, of being attacked, and so on and so forth. And before you go to places that are not deemed safe, then it's important to take precautions, taking a partner with you when you're walking those roads, and then not actively putting yourself in the let's say in a place where you could be attacked or harassed. Taking that precaution from before is very important too.
지난기 이따리 사정에서 수술을 가야 지치라. 지난 공부로 나와 있는 던진주 나래요. 그래. 사진도다 거에 대이 거에 가면 마스라. 한테까지 거에는 사례단지. 지난기 공부들 나야디 아니 지난 수술이 뭐 담은 까샤면은 나 당당 안 가도 좀 안다야. 남중가 공부 주주지 나이도. 내가 직도면도 나 지금 미기다쇼도 나 간지도는 제가 지금 먼저 나오는 거 있어. 이거를 테스트 좀 보면은 차이 좀 진짜 보면 이 자체 수치 캡처 체크. 배나가서 미질래 지금 콘도 수치 보지 나와요. 디버트 친구 수사야 돼. 배는 캐나다 미질래. 이게 뭐를 나와요. 나와요. 추가로 쉬어요. 그거 저를 보고 참아 가라 말아야 돼. 이 참아는 게 칼이 잡아요. 이 저거 참아 말아야 돼. 아니 가는 만 타마다 빼고 제거 그런 거는 막아야 착시가 이 제단실 때 들어. 제가 단단히 이 뭐를 공부를 나야 다가랑 나랑 까셔이나. 이 공부 자신보다 미시 봐서 막아야 책임. 빼나 어제 엔데라 사실 친구 빼나 참아 칸이 주 사실 지나고 사실 신발 밖에 물어보이나. 아니 다 대버로 나가 참아 이렇게 빼갈 거. 맞아 그래 담배도 이제 담배도 샤야 돼. 와 이제 뭐 당원이 봐. 따라서 단단한데 이 사제들 밖에 들어와요. 아니 사제 정말 과 이거 보면 자 어디라 참아도 참아 과 이거 과 거다 있는 거. 와 근데 이제 한번이 수도 한번이지라. 한번이라 과야 보여 샤야. 그냥 거를 붙이고 쓰는. 제가 한번도 수도 있지 공부 라인 까셔. 이 참아도 우리 가다 저도 내가 제일 참 까셔.
So then pertaining to your question about acting out of self-defense, then I think in those moments for us it makes sense to do what is necessary in those situations to save oneself, let's say, from attacks or from harassments. This is justified for us as beginners. Now pertaining to moments of anger that arises in us in normal situations, then I think it is particularly helpful to remember this verse from Shantideva's A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, wherein he says that if you say that you want to protect your feet, and then you begin to cover the whole world with leather, then there won't be enough leather to cover the world. But if you just cover your own feet with a few with a leather shoe, then you can begin to walk about the whole world, saving yourself from the pain of walking on thorns and so forth. So when we look at that example and relate it to anger, then it makes sense that if we begin to say that I am angry, and then you try to overcome your anger by a sense of anger again, then it's endless, and then everything becomes a source of irritation. Everything becomes a source of anger for you all the time. So if you cultivate a sense of patience, a sense of forbearance beforehand in you in those situations, then you do not have to be angry with every people, and you do not suffer as much as you do when you always act out of a sense of anger in all situations. So it is helpful to remind ourselves of this verse from Shantideva's A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and relating it again to moments of anger, then exploring this analogy. Then if you say that you come into conflict with a certain person, and then both of you act out of anger in this situation, then in those situations, and you do not have any sense of patience or forbearance in these situations, then if some person that knows the other person in this conflict comes into the picture, then you act out of anger towards this person too, and then you begin to kind of magnify the conflict, and then it becomes a huge conflict, and then you alienate some people's whole family against yourself, some people's whole circle of friends against yourself. Through that, it could even be a whole community is angered by you, and then so it just keeps on getting magnified. So in that sense, it's important to cultivate. It's very, very important to cultivate a sense of patience and forbearance in moments of anger. Yes. So, for example, let's say that I beat up a kid of a family, and then what happens in this situation? I acted out of a moment of anger, then immediately the kid's parents are going to come. And if I still act out of anger, then the parents, like cousins, relatives, they are going to come. And the situation only gets worse when we always act out of a sense of anger. Yes. So then the Shantideva's A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life begins to explore this with another verse, wherein he says that the kind of what we call intolerable and insufferable beings in this existence is as vast as the sky, and if you want to overcome all of these intolerable or insufferable beings, then it's impossible. Now, when we are saying intolerable and insufferable, one, it could be from your own perspective that they appear insufferable, and two, it could be from their own parts that they are actually engaging in something that is not quite good. So when we are saying insufferable and intolerable, not only from our side, but from their side as well. So the verse goes that what we deem to be insufferable and what we deem to be intolerable beings in this world, beings in this existence is as vast as the sky. And if you want to overcome all of them, then it is impossible. So rather than that, it is much heroic to conquer a moment of anger arising within your own mental continuum, and this is much more helpful than overcoming all of these all of these beings that we deem to be insufferable and intolerant. So, any other questions? Can I borrow a pen from someone? Thank you.
I just want to clear one doubt.
Mhm.
Like in verse 4, like we talked about the profound view and vast conduct, right? So are we referring to the wisdom and method aspect?
사무 주주다 아니 사무다 주나라 아니 자친 주주라 주라 니 가릴 라기레스
스무타에 주다 시초에 주다 뜻 지나려면 제가 가르 지면은 칼카보다 그다음에 너도 하는 지레리라 스무타에 주다 스무타와를 하고 되잖아 자친 주가를 너희가 너만이 리디디 슈슈 테스트하다 칼카보다
So then when we hear terms such as the profound view and the vast conduct, then to really get an understanding of what we mean by the profound view and the vast conduct, actually it takes years of study. It's very hard to kind of put it into a nutshell in a few seconds. So then simply we can understand it to mean, it is hard because herein we are talking about the tantric practices and tantric study at this point. We're talking about the profound view, and then the vast conduct refers to the instructions in the sutra, in the teachings themselves. So we could simply at this point take it to mean profound view refers to the tantric lineage of instructions, and vast conduct refers to the textual presentation of the teachings. Yes.
You mentioned the need for a spiritual teacher. It was one of the, sounded like a pretty core tenet to have as a spiritual teacher. Does this have to be a living teacher? Can it be the Buddha himself? And from my understanding, the Buddha did not have a teacher, if I'm not right. So trying to also get a grasp on that.
먼저 교회신이 된 수지어라. 교회신이 어떤 거래 교회신이 된 수지 소인 것도 왔어. 그러니까 그때 좀 버텨야 되지. 아니 교회신이 된 거에 나서라. 다된 거에 숨겨라서. 된 거에 나 아니 교회신이 된다. 미통라 된다. 시슈고 교회신이 지고를 했으라. 나 아니 덤바쿠랑라라. 교회신이 된다 지고를 했어. 지어디 가정 그게는 아니 덤바쿠랑라서라. 아니 기계는 지가요 말았어. 디 치료받기 이게 뭔가 때리는 데는 절로 주여라.
네. 템플릿 이때 있다. 템바 프로그램이 주요 아니 거기 대선 지나게 로트를 거치 그거 para 공부냐는 지도가서 이게 시간의 문제는 있대요. 근데 같았어요.
이게 신이 디 시슈고게 신이 진심 주던 거로 해서라. 연은 때뭐 다시 때뭐 그런 거 아니더라. 이게 이게 신이 되는 지기로 했어.
이게 나한테 이게 나한테 그래서 저도데 다시 덤베기만 숨셔지더라. 봐. 들라면 저기 칼라고 소소기 이치다 대바도 저치 접주. 다 대개히 선하면 다만데 르르인치 깨는 저치메라. 지나기 다다 지나기 계획이니더라. 아니 대바데 이제 저수로 이네. 때마다 먼저 비춰봐요. 덤베이 가르스면은 다 마음바이 미래를 아니 나도 아니 계획이 주스치 준비만 되게 됐어. 봐. 그래서 디디가 아니 많이 버시바잖아. 자가 문제거리. 정말 지루한데라. 디디 가르치는 수수 계획이 되는 거를 디시션 때문에 사실 계획이 디시션 기반이잖아.
So then when you say that the Buddha himself didn't have a teacher, then this is very doubtful. It is said that the Buddha, before he began to meditate for 6 years, actually studied under a lot of non-Buddhist teachers, but he wasn't satisfied with their teachings. He felt that these teachings do not offer him the road, do not offer him liberation out of samsaric existence. So then he took a decision to meditate on his own for 6 years. So then it's not that the Buddha did not have any teachers at all. And now coming to the question, can we rely on the Buddha himself as the spiritual teacher rather than the spiritual teacher being a living one? So then the Buddha himself has said that as I pass away from this world, as I pass away from this world, then for you to rely on a spiritual guide, then I might come in the form of different emanations as teachers, and in those moments it is important for you to recognize that I have come in this form as the teacher. So this is a particular prophecy that the Buddha himself made, and so from this prophecy it kind of stresses the importance of having a sense of conviction, a sense of devotion that is derived from a sense of conviction in the Buddha's teachings itself. So even when the Buddha has passed away, then when we see a spiritual guide, it is to inspire a sense of devotion in ourselves to the devotion to these spiritual teachers, based on the conviction that the teachings of the Buddha are being taught. Yes.
이제 아니 그다음 지난주 사제에 그다음 저거 중이지도 사제 때문에 아 양치고 지도 지시고 니들은 어떻다고 되게 남바 저거 중이 되가 사제 추변이요. 무시 아니 사제 배 사제가 다 자다가 그들로 와요. 사제 배 저 몸이 걸려 잖아. 저 몸이 걸려 사제 차이나야. 다 그나 좀 미 지tam에 봐 가다가 지고 내래 아니 그런 chance indigenous and chai like Jerusalem petne no ji ngela sanji sana ra tene ani ngela ta so kyo mo mo ne ji ni la so mo te pa nya ne che ka le mo te sanji sai bi shugo le do le kala ta chance ka le jo ne ne che wo te na she ko ji so ta chi ra.
So then when we think about the Buddha himself as a historical figure, then we only think about the Buddha in terms of that one life that he lived, and then we feel that the Buddha has achieved enlightenment in that very life. But then from the Buddhist tradition, there exists an interpretation that if you read the Jataka tales, this is a series of tales about the Buddha's previous lives. So then when we look at this kind of literature, then another sort of interpretation arises wherein it is understood that the historical Buddha's life was the Buddha engaging in an activity that serves as an example for sentient beings that you could achieve enlightenment, wherein the Buddha himself has already achieved enlightenment, and then he was coming into this world to act as if he's going through these things to serve as an example to sentient beings that they can achieve liberation and enlightenment for themselves. So this is one interpretation that exists in the Buddhist tradition. So I think if you are really interested, then I will encourage you to read the Jataka tales as well. Yes.
We have time for one more question. So you mentioned the preciousness of human birth, and it sounded like it was the perfect conditions for liberation, better than demigods. And when we look at the various possibilities of forms, whether it's animal, humans, demigods, I guess to be born as a human from an animal has to perform good karma. But when they don't have the capacity to perform good karma, how are humans born in the first place? And then secondly, it sounds like demigod could be a better form, but it also sounds like it's not. Do you progress to becoming a demigod on your way to liberation, or they just hit liberation? Do demigods strive to become human? Or this is kind of theoretical, but just to put it.
거의 단다가를 삼도당들라나 만주 디 년조지라 년조성 셈진을 해주라. 아니 고안을 지었지 무슨 뭐 셈진을 다 미야로 왔어. 셈진기 레야 오사야다 레니뭐 마사야 되는 삼코레 가보러 왔어. 다 디네니 밀어지나다 뭐네 거를 소도 친구로 문에 문제지 왔어. 다 딘데이나 밀레 장스라 고랑게 따질지나 하마이니 줄래지라 하마이다 할라보다 할라소고라 디조니 디조라 그거 망아요 주라 디조라니 디조스는 체이고 디데로지라 상담다 아니 뭐 지원이더라 지금 어디를 베스라 야나 마르베스 시바기 콜로노라 지금 림바치네 야야 드에도 베스라 디르베 마레 지티오디 니와니 미 당보고라 간데 충분해야죠
네, 다 신지심 다다니 제가 너무 들려라. 신지심을 따라서 그들은 미 감추기 쳐죠. 미 야부 치는 쳐죠. sana yapu tanarda yapu majene singele do yunda ko sabche sai ni ra muzu bi no muzu bi second season zamni samu to to zesha bisu to ra ani mela chiden do da ko tang na se ya to da muzu to ra tsitsu ko la ni mela de da tang to ra yapu majena ani simri shibale no de ko sabche sai ni ra do china i tenjo la de ga yapu chewa ina teji ji sa ni de de ko ne ta simri shibale be bi ya kyodo chewa yo na 이제 다다다 지금 미 가서 돌래 아니 미야 미래다 그들은 문제는 이제라 되게 이제 이내야 어떤 사이 시간에 딱 밀어간다고 하면서 제가 나 지금 누구나 수고랑 받는 거 너무 되기도 라 근데 이제 다 사기 되거든요 동해시랍니다 그래서 동해면 인주면 되거든 동해면 아니 과래 다들 올라다 지금 아니 취취에 상관 되기입니다 다 단단한 지 드라마니 방금 강의 먹을 때 땅을 취취고 취취에 그러지 라 되게 비밀을 쳐봐야 돼 지난 유대인 참 똑똑하다
So then we'll answer the second part of the question first, which is the question about how the demigod sounds a better form in samsaric existence, in that kind of understanding that since the human form is evidently much better form than the animal form. So then when we think about that, when we say that the human birth is precious, when you are blessed with all these endowments and all these freedoms, then just because you are blessed with these freedoms and endowments doesn't mean that that form itself dictates the karma. It doesn't dictate that. Now, just because you are blessed with all the facilities and all the opportunities doesn't mean that you're already far better off in the spiritual path. It means that you have the opportunity and the freedom if you put in the effort. If you don't do that, then even when you are blessed with all these opportunities and freedoms, then sometimes human beings are even worse than animals. This is the case too. For example, when we say that human beings are blessed with an intelligence that is so remarkable, then that very intelligence has pushed us towards creating a bomb which can destroy the whole world in seconds. And not just human beings, all the living beings within it. So from that example, we begin to realize that just because you are afforded opportunities and freedoms doesn't mean that you are already far better off the spiritual path. You need to put in the effort. You need to put in the effort in order to achieve. Put these opportunities and freedoms to good use. Otherwise, it's just that. So then, in that sense, we understand what do we really mean by saying that the human birth is precious in its nature. And now, when we're talking about your understanding that since the human form is much more suited to spiritual pursuits than the animal form, and then it naturally follows as a progression that the demigod's form is much more suited to spiritual path pursuit than human forms. This is not the case so, because as human beings we are always in contact with a gross sense of suffering, and due to that offers us the opportunity to actually think about existential suffering. And when we begin to think about existential suffering, then we begin to develop a determination that we want to be free from suffering. This is the kind of gross reality of human experience. But when we're talking about the demigods, in terms of there being less suffering in the demigods realm, then in that sense, of course, it sounds or seems a better form. But then that very fact that they suffer less, they do not have a gross sense of suffering, or they are not in touch with a gross sense of suffering all the time. Demigods and gods do not robs them of the opportunity to think about suffering and liberation at all. They do not really develop a sense of renunciation throughout the long lives that they live in the demigod and god realms. So that's why, for spiritual pursuit, it is said that the human birth is the perfect one.
근데 지금 이거들아 문제를 듣는 미 가르쳐줘서 아무튼 맞춰 정말 겨 민지치 장선 다다가서 겨 지금 되는 어쩌다 이리질래 님만 이제 멈추면 겨 참 반지 나 사이트 뭐 지금 뭐 메이지 뭐 아니 투미라 타마도 치 진거 봐야 용 진거 다 답도 땀 시라지도 다 생이 나오더라 안 되는 뭐 답도 아니 되게 슈라이 뭐하고서 근데 답도 안 되고 하나도 잘 되는 소리 좀 갈리갈리 민저가 하시죠 근데 시간이 이래 아니야 나도 세리 돈을 쉐면 비우는 줄을 비우디 갈리갈리 먼저 전부 다 집어요 뭐 비우지 갈리갈리 비수를 갈리갈리 좀 넘버 3
So then the second question, then how did human beings come to be in the first place? Now, from the Buddhist perspective, time is beginningless. And so when time is beginningless, then everything kind of comes to be. Then there is a time when everything is destroyed. Then it comes to be again and again in circle, keeps turning. And that is beginningless. And now I'm not sure how well it aligns and accords with the scientific exploration of how life first came to be. But in the Buddhist textual sources, then it is mentioned that how life first came to be that a world gets destroyed first, a world or a plane of existence, let's say, gets destroyed first. And when it gets destroyed first, then it gives rise to a new form of terrain, which is the earth element, what we call the earth mandala. And on top of that earth mandala, then there begins to form water. The water element begins to form. And when that water element begins to form, then the air element begins to fluctuate the water here and forth. And due to this interaction between the elements, there comes that water, and then there comes like bubbles in that fluctuation in the oceans, and in those bubbles life begins to first take form. This is the kind of classical textual sources explanation of how life first comes to, or when a world first begins to take shape. And now from the scientific perspective, you know how first human came to be. We talk about evolution from primates, there are diagrams that explain it, and so on and so forth. So from the Buddhist perspective, time is beginningless and life takes form like that when a world gets destroyed and then a new world takes birth. Yes.
이 간데 중만 이래 진짜 집어든 거나 간데 중 간데 중샤지 이거도 야뭐 제일 뱅게 집니다 그다야
So it is a good question, but more importantly, rather than thinking about how first human came to be and all that.
I think I meant it from a karmic perspective. How does it like if I was a frog in a previous life? If I was a frog in a previous life, what could I have done as a frog to become a human?
There are many animals that do.
Then you need to remember that even before the frog there was life. Before.
But animals also do. Maybe they don't study the Dharma, but they do really great things. I mean, I watched a video of a monkey saving a cat that fell into a well, right? And you can see different animals adopting other animals that have.
Yes.
So they do precious things, even if they don't follow the Dharma. So maybe not.
Okay. It's beyond what we can perceive.
Because it's not just because for me it's like being a good person, right? Like it's not that only Buddhists will have a better rebirth. Like there are so many people. Most people actually don't follow Buddhism, but they can still do good things if they follow different religions or non-religions at all. But it's really about their actions in this life, I believe, right? That will determine whether
Yes.
will happen next life.
다다스 거의 뒤어디던다 레 가르산이 미터 겨워진 기계를 해드리다 아니 근데 저는 스님말라 베바지 나스라 세던다 밀라기고에 레 하데사다 드니 나이라나 베바기 지어지 무슨 바에 딩은은 베만 보여라스 지어 잠이는 이제 레디 카드 두기를 나도 심이되어라스 그런 게 나는 심진데 되지 볼라 심진기 춘에 베 기와 드모토에지 삼다야 말이스 가지나나 심진데 이제 그런 게 니도 통선스라 니도지 비오지기 심이 잡되지로 총반에 마사야 네 심진 가시기 치기 심이 볼라 소중치에도 어딘데 막 보여라 제자니 저 글론다 자주도 그런라라 이래스라 미 수카르지 미 남바간르지가 라기가 말이스 대난시니 남바지고 기와 치마라야 벌링이라데 시에 말이스 가야나나 저 글론 자주라 류지쳐서라 대소 남바 이메일 아마들 보면 저야 아버지 지기 글론야 아버지는 내가 보면 기와야 아버지 기사야 아버지 두는 거라서 이제 yes
미지와는 반이 이거 제 지나서 매기치고 쓰는 게 이제 남비치고다 말고 남비는 알아서 유지 지나는 거 제시랑 가리 야부체는 그 유대삼제 야부산데 야부메인 거라 지나게 데켈리니 지나라 지나온 단대 차이래 심지 프라이기 딜레 레레 야부산이 계획이 사부되어도 이건데 하고 나타나 kinda peji na jora kinda peji ane sani jene de peji gitu juga dulu sih lah ya mereka sanji seri pun mungkin pun itu sih sure kinda peji nggak ane gitu dulu sih jadi kalau seri pun mungkin kita kali ini itu masih ada pun kalau ni kalau ni gitu dulu lah kalau kita siapa jadi cintu lah kalau ni gitu dulu lah na gawe sabe dulu mata lah mata ini kan ane kalau be sampai jam tengah beda semacam mana juga kan saja cara kerja nara ada je gitu dua ini ada game semacam sampai musuh itu lah kan saja thanje cemari dilelap cece tu lah jadi itu kan ale kan lah di kabar cete sampai dulu lah kau kan apa lah
주로
mana dia guru je lah तो शिरा नहीं होता
बोला तो आने कोरा जबले
तो जने चुप किधरा ने जने कोरा टेस्ट लाए चिगरा या पापा दे चीज से जने कोरा टेस्ट लाए शिरा नहीं था ना कांची पे ना बुढ़ा मोड़ जी चवाले वाली ना बा बुढ़ा मोड़ दी अनि सुनजे की चवा दी ना तो अनि चवा दी अनि चुद ने क्यों रहा नु क्यों दा कोरा क्यों चुने कोरा जी थे चुने कोरा जी थे तो कोरा जी के सा देने ये सब दूर शिरा चिगरा शिरा मा चिदला खाना 치 겨워잖아. 그래. 제가 비디오 좀 보면에 그거 말하는 거 다 치 겨워져. 치 겨워는 거 안젤 파파잖아요. 다 투시.
다탄다 디스.
파파기 겨워는이라 아니 파파기 겨워는 이거라 치 대인사. 근데 그거 거라시랑 시기 신나가 거라 테고. 그걸 보는 거 겨워상서 그거 요마지. 근데 유신이 싸워 친구들이야. 주디 거라지 테고 그래 때니 근데 거라게 자지 다들 간지 드니 거리네. 겨울 한마디게 부도보다 치 말에 파바라고 그리죠 있네. 그런 미 보이네. 내 자와 친구들 거래 때문에 계속 들리더니 그냥 타바샤데 사고 두려다. 제가 그런 게만 기와 되듯이네. 그한테 뒤를 계속 사 아니 미쳐네. 한다야 가르도 중요하게 타바샤데 사고 거라는 일도. 그럴 때는 수지 신바질 때는 신바지 제 이거 갖고.
So then the fact that animals can also have the root virtue to take better birth is explained in this tale from the Buddha's life itself, wherein the Buddha has two main disciples, Mongliana and Shariputra, and they used to kind of take care of all the Buddha's affairs in those days when the Buddha himself was busy. And then there was a particular lay person who wanted to take ordination into the monastic fold, and when he approached either of these two, Shariputra or Mongliana, then these two disciples are said to have omniscience, and they have developed the So then when he requested that he be taken into the monastic fold, then one of them said that you have no rude virtue at all to be accepted into the monastic fold and to take ordination. And then the disheartened, the layperson went back, and on the way he came to meet the Buddha, and when the Buddha saw him disheartened, then asked him what happened, and then he said that I wanted to take ordination and join the monastic fold, but either of your disciples say that I do not have any rude virtue to be accepted into the monastic fold. And when the Buddha heard that, then he said, because the Buddha has full omniscience, then he said that is not the case at all. You actually do have rude virtue. You have actually accumulated the rude virtue to join the monastic fold and take full ordination. And then the Buddha began to recount past life of this lay person, wherein how did he come to accumulate the rude virtue. And then the story goes, there are two kind of interpretations of the story, or two versions of the story, wherein one version says that in a previous life he was born as a fly, and flies tend to be attracted to cow dung and so forth. So then when this fly was attracted to cow dung, then there was a flood in the area, and that flood water carried the cow dung on a circumambulation of a stupa. So without even intention, the fly took one circumambulation of the stupa, and due to that you have accumulated the rude virtue to eventually achieve liberation. So this is one version. Another version is wherein he was born as a pig, and then a mad dog attacked this pig, chases this pig, and then this pig inadvertently takes a round of a stupa or a holy structure, and through that, without any intention, he has accumulated the rude virtue to eventually achieve liberation. So this is the kind of story from the Buddha's life, which highlights that animals, without even intention, can accumulate the rude virtue to take higher births.
제가 되게 근데 미드 거라제 쇼가우도 쇼가우도 바이나는 나가 뭐지라 이제 뭐지 거라제 되다 봐 진짜 이제 이제 지디지 단나만 미이는데라 단나만 미이나 단나바이나 지민이 나와지 보되게 말아 그냥 하루 단나바이나 그래 바이슈다 카시다 카리네 저네스 그래 이마이베 수야 마지나 심제다 데이저 타는 두나 내가 들으시오나 예선다 예와나 데이저라 제가 단단하게 야들다 말에 이제 거래라 근데 지나가 저기 너랑 저기 한번만 얘기 해보라 시간은 시선을 야가래라 지요다 봐 시간 주랑 시간은 계승도 좀 지나가 저기 레벨을 이내 있죠 가만히 가서 샤샤비기다 뒤가 게 사면에 또 투이나 안져야 돼 또 지금 찌찌에 다나 가는 저기 제반에 나들라래 저 시간 어디 아니야 시바지나에서 넘어차야래 치드 시미도 되네 그러니 다되게 저네 치세 존이 미리는 저네 이집이 이거는 미리미다 남바이나 남바다 부인도 부다 본다 이거 저도
So then there is no certainty in samsara, the kind of form that you will take. The fact that I am a Buddhist in this life does not guarantee the fact that in the next life, or in the life after that, you will always be a Buddhist. I could be born as a Christian, a Jew, or a religion that we have not heard of at all. Or I could be even born as an animal. Or I could, if I do not really be careful in this life, then I might also accumulate the causes and conditions to be born in the hell realms too. So there is no guarantee, and the fact that I am born as a female in this life does not dictate that I should be born as a female in my next life. I could be born as a male, so on and so forth. So there is no real certainty and guarantee in samsaric existence, irrespective of the shape or irrespective of the realm in which you are born in. So then, if this is so uncertain, then worrying about it doesn't help. Now, this is why we say the human birth, or the birth that we have right now, we need to make the best use of it to accumulate the causes and conditions to take a favorable birth in the next life. So So when we're talking about rebirth, then of course, from immemorial time, we have so many karma that we have accumulated. But then in the Buddhist tradition, we talk about the importance of the mental state at the moment of death. And if this is motivated by a sense of compassion, a sense of fearlessness, then this has a huge hand in dictating the next life or the next birth that you are taking. But irrespective of these kind of things, it's important to make the best use of this life itself in order to accumulate the causes and conditions to be born in a favorable realm. So, shitting on each other. So then in Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, seminal text explaining the whole Buddhist doctrine to a king. So then in this text, Nagarjuna says that it is very laughable how samsaric existence is, because he has already achieved enlightenment. So when he looks at samsara, he finds it very funny, in the sense that he looks at one moment and he says that in that moment he's looking at a family, and then he looks at the family and he says that it's very laughable, this samsaric existence, because when I look at there was a person who was beating a dog and then eating meat of a goat, and then there was a child in his lap. So when he saw that, he said samsaric existence is very laughable. You are eating your father's flesh, and you are beating on your mother's head, and who you consider to be your enemy, you are taking care of him on your lap. So when he says that, then in a previous life, the meat that he is eating, the goat that he slaughtered to eat the meat, was actually his own father in the previous life. And then the dog that he was beating was his own mother, and the child that he's now so compassionate and so much love towards was actually his enemy in his previous life. So this is the kind of uncertainty and very laughable nature of samsara.
I have just a technical question. What is root virtue in, how is it different from virtuous karma, and how do you see it in Tibetan? Is it,
Gezadan give lela jala dibara la chebar kharis. Bajadida nyamdo meba shukchim korela jishira. Meba. Mare tidu zama meba yo mara. Tat sechima la meba shukchim bolera. Dumbado shukchim bolera. So then when we're talking about karma itself, then we can take it to we can understand it as the action itself of body, speech and mind. And when we're talking about root virtue, irrespective of the time when we engage in an action, then a root virtue depends on a lot of causes and conditions, not only on one lifetime.
Is this imprint?
Huh?
Is this imprint?
Of course, even in karma there is imprint. Every karmic activity leaves an imprint on the consciousness. So what we are saying, root virtue is there is a moment of great aspiration, a pure sense of aspiration, not only, not necessarily during the time when this root virtue is accumulated, but in lives after that, there is a huge, a true sense of aspiration. Then when causes and conditions come together, then karmic activities take the form of being root virtues. Yes.
Yani sujeito de chakra.
Yes. So then we break for tea and gather again in half an hour.